It finally happened. I was really wondering when this particular reality was going to finally hit mine. And I guess despite the fact that Fran's supposed to be giving Ferdinand these updates, I guess it took him actually seeing it before he came to realize the significance of the printing press and everything. But yeah, episode 31 of Ascendance Bookworm, absolutely fantastic episode. It felt like it had so much stuff in here. It's kind of one of those reverse effects where sometimes you feel like an episode goes by way too fast, and there's other times, especially with Ascendance Bookworm, they do this quite often, is where you feel like you just got way too much stuff and it felt like it was more than one episode. Not the pacing was wrong or anything, but so we have the episode. Obviously, we just had this whole attack on the carriage, and we're kind of giving a little bit of a follow-up on that. It does mention the idea that the farmers that were attacking the carriage were not, like, half of them were not from this domain. So it's kind of one of those question marks of, like, were they not able to round them up and question them? Like, did they just let them go? It's kind of one of those ones where it's a little bit odd how they didn't capture any of the farmers, yet they knew that half of them were not from there, or they didn't get enough information. Yeah, my assumption would be that they would be executed, but maybe they just chose not to say anything. I don't know. It was odd. But there's one other interesting thing that I don't know if this wasn't well explained in the anime. Maybe it's different in the light novel, but they kind of didn't really explain well enough, is that because Damiel was able to detect the user inside the forest, meant that it would probably have been somebody that was a devouring soldier, which I don't know what the significance of Damiel detecting it. Maybe it's because he's a noble, but he's a lower class. Maybe if you're a higher class noble, it's harder for you to detect devouring soldiers. Again, the question mark is, what is a devouring soldier? there's a big question mark that's coming from all this. I mean, even the final scene is bringing up a lot of questions. Why is somebody looking for children that have devouring? My assumption is that there is a group that is known as the devouring that seek out people that have the devouring, and they use their plethora of magic against people. Why a noble would be coming to the cathedral to find a child with devouring was because they want to take her and put her in this group of people that are known as the devouring, that have unending supply of mana, like a large amount of mana that is overpowering them, and then use that as a weapon. That's my assumption, that the devouring are people that probably have the devouring and they use them for bad reasons. But again, the big question mark is, why is Damiel noticing this a thing? That was the only thing that was really not really explained. With Mine back at the cathedral, it was really cute seeing Fran and Rosina thanking Mine, obviously pointing out the fact that a Grey Robe's life is like less significant than even farmers. Because at least with farmers, they're able to produce crops, they're able to produce taxes, whereas the Grey Robes don't really supply enough. Obviously thanking her for saving their lives despite that fact. And this is where we get into the tour of everything that Mine has been doing. Again, it's kind of funny they point out the fact that, technically Fran was supposed to be telling Ferdinand all this stuff. Despite that, I kind of assumed eventually Ferdinand was going to have to go and check out everything that she's doing. He's technically been pretty off hands, but because Sylvester wants to see everything, Ferdinand's like, I'm coming too. So yeah, that was interesting. We first meet Wilma, and she tells him about Wilma and everything that she does, and Ferdinand at that point's like, I've seen all of your art that you're doing. It's very beautiful. Keep doing what you're doing. And she really likes that. That gets talking about the cards, which she said that she's not selling them. That's why she's not reporting it, but she is using them to teach all these children the alphabet. Which point, finally, I was waiting for this moment. Ferdinand wasn't too happy. Like, he didn't want to reprimand her, but he's like, wait, you're doing this? And she's like, what's wrong? And he's like, we'll talk about it later. And I'm like, oh crap, here it is. It's coming. The moment that we're talking about basically teaching these children the alphabet, becoming literate, bringing a big question mark in Ferdinand's mind. Not that he's a bad person, but we'll get into that. And this gets into the workshop itself, which Sylvester's like, why aren't you making toys? Toys are more fun. Why aren't you making toys? She's like, because I want books made. He's like, you're very selfish. She's like, you're it's just like this idea that, is that a shock to you? She wants her books. She's gonna get books. And then, yes, Sylvester finally meets Benno, which leads to, yes, they're meeting together. So Sylvester finally gets with Benno, which it seems like Benno's upset about it. He doesn't say exactly what Sylvester wanted. My assumption there is that because he says that it's such a great opportunity, but he doesn't know how it's going to pan out, tells me that Sylvester's probably enlisted him to maybe create a restaurant in maybe the nobles area. That's all I can kind of guess, but I'm assuming he's seen an expansion of what he can do. Maybe just become, selling some of his chefs off to Sylvester. And obviously during this time, Ferdinand's checking out the printing press that Mine had created, and again, doesn't seem too happy about it. This is going to change history. Yeah. But before we get into that, we did have a scene briefly with Sylvester and Mine, which was really a cute scene. I really did like the scene because we've kind of hinted heavily on Sylvester being kind of this, goofball, and even they have this point where she asks the relationship between Ferdinand and Sylvester, and he doesn't want to speak about it. There's oddity about Sylvester. Yes, he's over the top. Yes, he's poking, prodding at Mine, but it does seem like he does like children. Mine even mentions at some point after Sylvester and then went out to do the, check out the forest, they came back with a boar, and he gave the boar off to the orphanage members. And Mine's, mentioning the idea that I think he does like these children. He likes to be around these children. And yeah, we get this little cute scene where Sylvester is, thanking her for showing him around. And as a token of gratitude, he gives her a pendant and mentions the idea that she should always keep this pendant with her. And if she's ever in danger, to put her blood mark on it, and he will for sure come and save her. So it kind of, I don't know what it's going to be, if it's going to be, is it supposed to be a protective charm, but it kind of insinuates this idea that it might have, it's either going to be something that will notify him if she's in danger, or possibly there's some sort of summoning magic to it that will bring him to her. But either way, it kind of indicates that either way, if she's in danger, this thing will somehow bring him to her. Again, a very sweet moment, obviously capped in with him poking and saying that you need to say Bui again, but it was really cute. Really was like a point where you kind of realize that he's got a strong interest in her, and he does like children, and he's not some evil guy. So yeah, this turns into the big conversation between Mine and Ferdinand. Yes, like I said before, I was kind of waiting for this moment to come. This idea of, there's always going to be a big question mark that comes up when it comes to giving the commoners knowledge, giving the commoners literacy and all this kind of stuff. And I was expecting this to come up a lot sooner in the series, but apparently this is the point which, I guess it makes sense now because she's starting to mass produce this stuff. The thing I wasn't expecting in this conversation was how he puts it at first. And it's funny because it never really dawned on me before. So during like the first season, I think it was especially in the first season, a lot of the focus was on Lutz. And the thing they were pointing out was that Lutz was essentially going to have to take over his father's shop, which I think was a carpenter. And he didn't want to do that. He wanted to become a traveling merchant. And the thing that they were trying to instill upon this particular setting was that children typically grow up to learn the skills that their parents do and then get into their business. Like every family, there's the carpenter family and there's the blacksmith family, and the family just, it passes on generation to generation, and their skills are always passed on, and there's always somebody that does certain things. There's the blacksmith guy. There's the, like I said before, and it didn't dawn on me until Ferdinand pointed it out, but like, okay, so you have the current way of making books is you put all this stuff together, and then you have this person writes down the stuff, and then you have this person puts the crowning around it, the decoration around the pages. Everybody, there's like, it goes to multiple hands just to make one book. And that was obviously the whole point of why it was so expensive, and the way Mine couldn't get a hold of them is that they were handcrafted. Every book is handcrafted. But now, with the printing press that Mine has created, they're able to mass produce it all in one building. They don't need a group of people. They don't need a writer, a scholar, an artist, a crafter, all these people to put this thing together. And that, again, like I said, that was something I wasn't really thinking about, is how many families that have generations and generations of this are going to suddenly no longer have their wealth. And how many lower class nobles is that going to affect, and thus create more enemies for her? It's crazy to think about. And I mean, that's technically technology as a whole. It's paralleling with this world, our current world, and the idea that every time technology advances, the previous generation falls away. We had carriage drivers, now we have buses. You have taxi service that soon could possibly be replaced by self-driving cars. I mean, every time some new technology comes out, the previous generations of people that hand down skills for generations and generations have been lost. So despite the fact that it's so nice that Mine now has books and everybody can have books and everybody has knowledge, there is the side effect that so many of these families that have passed down artistry their entire life and generations are all now suddenly going to have no income. They're going to be poor. They're not going to have work anymore. They're going to have to force their children to find new crafting, new things they have to do. The task that took 50 people now takes 1. And now those 49 people need to find something else. It's a side effect to the progression of technology and the advancement of civilization. And I'm curious about how much that's going to weigh on Mine. She's obviously already thinking about it, but I would be really curious to see her really start to think on that. Like, what if that was one of my father's jobs and I'd be taking it away from him? How does it make her feel in that regard? I really do hope that this writer comes back around to that and really does ponder on it, because unfortunately it kind of gets pushed aside, and her time to really think on it for other things. Which, yes, those other things, including what Ferdinand was kind of pointing out. And yes, like I said, the thing that I was thinking about was, what are the nobles going to think about commoners now having literacy and knowledge? Ferdinand asked her specifically, what happened in your world when the commoners and the farmers were able to read and write? Well, in some cases, they rose up against the royalty. They overthrew and created their own governments. Then yes, there was some cases where you had a lot of diplomatic leaders that were using propaganda to sway voters. There's a side effect, there's a negativity that comes with that. Being able to massively spread documents everywhere so that everybody learns propaganda against somebody else does kind of sway the vote. But she does note that there's no way for her to know how this will affect this world, because obviously with this world, you can't really spread propaganda. There's still going to be nobles with magic. The commoners aren't going to suddenly go, all I can read and write now, suddenly I feel like I need to overthrow the nobles. They're still got magic. They still have the power, an actual power against them. They're not like our world where it was only the royalty had smarts over the commoner and knowledge and literacy. It was because in this world, they have extra power because they have magic. But yeah, this leads to Ferdinand basically saying, stop printing until you're at least 10. Adding another thing to the list of things that are going to change in her life when she reaches 10, and that's because she'll now be a noble at that point, because she'll be adopted into this family, and then she'll be able to use that sway and power that she now has in a noble family to protect herself. Which she's like a little bit upset at this, and he's like, well, you can get adopted now. She's like, no, I don't want to, which is a good thing for the later part. But this did reveal to us finally her age, which is actually 8. So we do know at this point that she has 2 years left with her current family. And yeah, that's the point in which she does ask him, what's the relationship to Sylvester? And he's like, don't pry into things. And that was like a woof. I was kind of wondering if this will be a reveal that possibly they're brothers or something. Again, this seems like a very soft spot for Ferdinand, so I'm really curious when they're going to reveal what exactly Sylvester is. But the positive thing that came out of this whole conversation was that she was able to go home, which was great. It was really sweet seeing her finally getting, able to go back home, which was great because she actually did arrive there by the time that her little brother was actually born. She said that she's going to do everything that she can to make sure that he doesn't forget her in those 2 years that she's going to spend with him, leave as many picture books as she possibly can for him, which I think is like super sweet. This idea that possibly later on we can have this moment where Camille is finally reintroduced to Mine and knows who she is based on like all this great books, and maybe he becomes like a scholar or something, that because of all the knowledge that she kind of instills upon him with the books. But yeah, I was super happy that we didn't have a tragic mom. I'm so glad the baby was born. So glad that Mine was able to be there with them. It was just super sweet. And like I said, the final statement that she gives and wanting to do as much as she could for him in those 2 years is really fantastic. I thought it was absolutely super sweet. And it was even more tragic to find out in the aftercast that apparently that her parents have like lost so many children, which is again kind of in the vein of this setting. I mean, this isn't like you go to a hospital and they have all this equipment to help you make sure the baby comes out safe. And it's not like they go back to a home where everything's perfectly insulated so you take care of the child and you have all the medicine in the world to take care of a child. It's common in this world to lose a lot of children. They had one miscarriage, and they had one that only survived a year before it died in the winter. Then they had Tootie and Mine, and then apparently they lost at least 2 more children after that. It's just super tragic. But yeah, the final scene that we had, which is the hint at what's to come, is that Delia did overhear Lutz talk about the fact that Mine can't make it to the cathedral because she's doing all the celebration. Delia hears this, goes to report it, and had a very interesting little exchange with Jenny, who is the one that she always reports to because the high priest is never there. And Jenny's pretty much being nostalgic over the fact that, Rosina used to play this music and Wilma would draw and they would dance together, and knowing that Rosina is still playing the music, it seemed like she's a little jealous. Like, oh, she hasn't changed at all. Like, she's still able to have fun. I think that's what it was implying. But in kind of response to this, in a little bit of jealousy pit, she decides to tell Delia, oh, just so you know, there's a noble coming, and that noble's looking for little children, likes little children, which I was like, ugh, okay. Which Delia, wanting to become a mistress of a noble so that she can get away from the cathedral, is super excited about it. It's gonna get all dressed up for it. But yeah, the last comment that she makes under her breath was that Oh no, he's looking for children with devouring. So again, this goes back to my previous thing about this group of called the devouring. I'm assuming is probably a group that's using people that have devouring as basically weapons. Ferdinand's always been kind of defensive about what mine could be in the future. Like the fact that she is so volatile, she's a threat, and he needs to use her in a positive way to help the domain. And if there is a group that is known as a devouring that is possibly using these people, they're probably using them kind of like, tools. Go out there and just let loose because you have no control over your capabilities, just use it. You have this unending mana, use it. Well, we'll see what comes from that. That was a lot to cover. Oh my gosh, episode 31 was just packed. But like I said, it was hitting on a lot of stuff that I've been kind of theorizing for a while now. Stuff that I really wanted to get into. Like I said, the effects that this advancement in technology can cause for society, and that almost lack of really thinking about it that Mine's doing. Now, granted, she does have her desires for this is what I want, but yeah, finally taking a step back and really seeing what kind of damages that would have on a society, and yes, what people would think about that being introduced. So really cool to finally get that stuff really kind of dived into. But we'll see where it goes from here. Obviously, the big next thing is going to be this noble that's looking for devourers and might finally see some sort of impact happen. This guy might be involved with the attacks that have happened so far. Maybe he's just coming straight to the cathedral. I'd be curious to see what kind of comes from this, but I'm kind of feeling like something bad might come here around the next corner, so we'll see. But I hope you guys will join me next week for that impressions. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment. Let me know what's thought of the episode. Additionally, if you want to support us more, we have a Patreon link and tips link in the description below. We definitely appreciate everybody that supports us. Now, take care.